In this video you will learn how to implement authentication by using Drizzle ORM. And if you don't know what is Drizzle, it's a really popular ORM for TypeScript, which essentially means it is something which simplifies working with different databases. As you can see here, it is focused on being connected to different serverless platforms, like for example Versal Functions or Supabase. And as you can see here, it covers lots of different databases, like Postgres, MySQL, but also databases from Supabase or Versal, for example. And additionally, it has things like Drizzle Studio, which allows you to access your database and do all necessary changes in it. And here I want to focus on creating authentication in Node.js and Express application with usage of Drizzle and Postgres. Our first step is to install our main dependencies, and these are Drizzle ORM and Postgres. Additionally, as a dev dependency, we want to install DrizzleKit and typings for our Postgres. Now let's look on our application. Inside source server.ts, I have a small Express application which we're starting on port 3000. And I want to mention that you must install and start Postgres on your machine in order to start implementing this project. Our first step here will be to create a new file in the root drizzleconfig.ts. And here we are providing the whole config for Drizzle when we will use it from the console. This is why here let's with export default define a config. And this function is coming from DrizzleKit. So first of all, inside we are providing our dialect, and this is Postgres. Then we have a node folder. This is where all our files will be generated. In our case, it will be source/drizzle. Then we must specify where our schema will live. It will be in source drizzle schema.ts. After this, we must provide our database credentials. In my case, I am using Postgres inside Docker. This is why my host here will be 0000. It might be if you set up it locally, you need to provide here a host localhost. Then the port, it's a default port of Postgres 5432. Then we have a user. In my case, I'm using a root Postgres user. My password is 123, and the database is Postgres. And the last one here is SSL false because we don't use SSL while developing locally. After DB credentials, I want to add here verbose true, so we see more information inside console, and strict true. Now, in order to test that our Drizzle configuration is working correctly, we can write here npm drizzlekit introspect. And what it does, it will check our database and try to generate schema from it. For us, it is completely fine because my database is empty and there is nothing to parse here. And this is the output that we are getting. No config path provided, use default path. And this is the default path with Drizzle config.ts in the root that we just created. It uses Postgres because we specified it, and it checked all our tables, columns, enums, indexes, and so on. They are all 0 because we don't have anything. It also generated for several files. Let's have a look. Inside source Drizzle, we have schema.ts with just 2 imports, then relations, which is also empty, and here is the first SQL file. This is the file of our migration. It is also empty, and meta information of Drizzle. This is completely fine as it confirms that we successfully connected Drizzle to our database. Now it is time to create our first table, and as we are talking here about users, in order to register or login user, we need a users table. This is why let's jump inside schema.ts, and this is exactly where we're creating our schema. So here I want to create a users table by calling Postgres table and providing inside a key users. As a second parameter, we have an object with several fields. We for sure need an ID, which is a serial. It comes from Postgres core. Let's provide inside an ID, and here we must say that this is a primary key and it can't be null. After this, we also need an email, and our email will be a text, again from Postgres, and we're writing that the name is email. It should be not null, and it also must be unique. Also, we want to store here a username, which will be a text username, and it can't be null, so not null. And the last one will be our password, which is a text password, and it is also not null. So this is how our schema for Postgres will look inside Drizzle. As you can see, even if you don't know SQL or Postgres, it is quite easy to read. Here we're creating a table users and we're specifying all fields inside. We're creating a serial ID, which is a primary key and not null, email is unique, and these are just two tags. What we must do as a next step, we must generate a migration. What does it mean? This is just a schema, it is not inside database, and we must generate a step how this table will be generated. In order to do that, we can write npx drizzle kit generate. I'm hitting here enter, and what it does, it parses our schema.ts and tries to create new migration, which actually means if there are some changes in our schema.ts which we must apply to create new migration, it will do that fast. As you can see here, we're getting that it reads the config, and here is one table, users, and 4 columns were created. And here is our new SQL migration file. Let's have a look. Here our 0 file is empty. This is our next file. And inside we see just a normal SQL file which creates for us a table. This is exactly SQL which will be used inside Postgres. So this is the code that must be executed in order to create a table. So now we must jump inside a console and write, instead of generate, migrate. And what it does, it will apply all our migrations that you can see here and will generate for us a correct database. As you can see here, there is no output, which means all migrations are applied. And in order to check that, we can use Studio. So we can write here npx drizzle kit studio. I'm hitting enter and it will start Drizzle Studio on this URL. And this is how it looks like. It is automatically connected to our Drizzle, and we can see here on the left that there is a table users with fields ID, email, username, password, and it is completely empty. We can create here a record, but I don't want to do that right now. So as you can see, Drizzle Studio really helps to manipulate data and understand what you have inside your database. So we successfully created our first table. Now we must connect our project to the Drizzle. And you for sure want to say, okay, we have this Drizzle config, isn't it not enough? And actually not, because this is just for the CLI tool. Now inside our source Drizzle, I want to create a new file db.ts, where inside we will write everything to connect Drizzle to our project. And first of all, here I want to create a client by calling new client. And as you can see, it is coming from Postgres. Now here inside we must provide the same data. First of all, it's host, then the port, then we have our user, Postgres, password 123, and database Postgres. So our client is ready. Now we want to connect to the database. This is why here let's get our DB by calling Drizzle, providing inside our client and schema. And we're providing schema as a second parameter inside the object. And as you can see, we're getting our schema from the schema file. So what we have here inside, we have just this export const users and nothing else, which actually means we will use a table users from the schema because it is fully covered. We can see here all fields of our columns and access them everywhere. So DB is exactly what we will use across the whole application to work with our database through this client and the schema that we specified. Now inside our server TS, we want to connect first to the database and only then start our application. This is why here let's create an asynchronous function and call it. And inside we need to write await client, and we're getting client from drizzledb.connect. And after we're sure that we successfully connected to the database, we want to start our application, so we can move app listen inside. Now in the console I want to run npm run dev, and as you can see here, the server started, which actually means first of all we connected to the database, and then we successfully started our application. Now it is time to implement our authentication. So what do we have? We prepared our users table, but we need several types in order to work efficiently with our user. This is why here I want to export a type user, and we can get it by using type of users dot, and here we have infer select. And as you can see inside our type, we're getting an object with ID, email, username, and password. These are all our fields, and this type is extremely comfortable to use across the application. Exactly in the same way, we need a new user. Why that? Because we need a type for the user which does not have an ID yet. This is why here users.inferSelect, and in this case, as you can see, ID can be undefined. Now we can jump inside dbts and create here a new function to register a user. So here let's create a function, create user, and we know that it must be an asynchronous function where inside we're getting a new user of type new user that we just created. And as you can see, it comes from schema.newUser. Now what we're getting back is a promise of our schema.user. And in order to create a user, we can call here db.insert, and we're providing here a table where we want to create our user. So it will be schema.users, and here will be .values, and inside values we're providing our new user that we got from the outside. After this we can specify returning, and if you don't provide anything, then all fields will be returned. Now here let's just save this to some variable and check what we're getting back. As you can see here, the result is an array of ID, password, username, and email, which actually means here we want to destructure our array because we will get just a single value back. And here we're getting our created user. After this, we must return our created user back. And additionally, here we can check if the user was not created, then we want to throw an error. So let's add this condition. If there is no created user, then we can just throw new error, failed to add user. So we created our basic create user function, but we didn't use it inside our server. This is why here let's create a new route, app post on/users. This is our register route, and here is an async function. We're getting here request, response, and next. And now inside we must wrap the whole code in try catch. When we're getting an error, we want to provide this error inside next. And inside our try, we want to call our function and get some result. So here we're waiting from the response from create user that we just added in our DB file. And inside we will provide request body from our application. In order to parse request body, we can add here abuse with express.json. And after we're getting our result, we want to respond with it back. This is why here I will throw it inside res.json, which actually means inside server.json we're registering our route post on/users, and inside we're calling a create user function from our DB. Now here inside postman on/users, I want to create a post request with body, email, password. But additionally here we must provide a username because this is a register method. I'm hitting here send, and as you can see, as a response, we got an object with ID, email, username, and password. We can also open our Drizzle Studio, reload the page, and as you can see in browser, there is a new record with ID, email, username, and password that we just created. This is already good, but we have a problem. Our password is not hashed, and this is a must. This is why here let's jump to the console and install a bcrypt package. Additionally, we want to install types bcrypt as a dev dependency. Now we can jump back inside dbts, and here before we create a user, I want to add hashed password by calling await on function hash. And we're getting this hash function from bcrypt, and we're providing inside the password of the user and the salt. So now our hashed password is there, but we must add it to the value. This is why here I want to spread our new user and override here a password field to the hashed password. Let's change here our email and username to make it unique. I'm hitting send, and as you can see now our password was generated correctly and it is hashed. But here is the problem. We don't really want to give back a password which is hashed. It is not secure, and we don't want to expose this field. This is why we must jump here, and in returning we can specify what fields we want to get back. In our case, it will be an ID, and we're reading it from schema users.id, then a username, which is schema users.username, and our email, which is our schema.users.email. But here is the problem now. We're getting an error that property password is missing here. And it is correct because we're not returning it. We removed it from the created user, which actually means we must create a new data type for it. I want to jump here and create a new data type, which will be a user without password. And we can use here omit, where we're providing our user type and then fields that we want to omit. In our case, it is a password. As you can see now, user without password simply has ID, email, and username. And now inside our create user function, we want to return schema user without password, and we're not getting an error. Let's try again. Here is foo2 and username foo2. I'm hitting send, and we're getting back just ID, username, and email. Now we successfully registered the user, but we didn't generate a JSON web token. And this is exactly what we're using to authenticate a user. So let's jump to the console and install JSON web token package. And additionally, we want to install a dev dependency types JSON web token. Now inside our db.json here on the top, I want to create a new function generate GWT token. And here as a parameter, we're getting our user, which will be schema.userWithoutPassword. And here back, we will get a string. Now inside here, we can return a function sign. We're getting it from JSON Web Token package, and we're providing inside some unique information. In my case, I want to provide an object with email, which is user.email. And here as a second parameter, we must provide some unique string. In my case, I will provide GWT secret. Most importantly, this string should not be exposed anywhere. It must be available only on the server, and this is exactly how our server can parse this GWT token. So we successfully created generate GWT function. Now we want to add this field token to our created user. This is why here I want to return a new object where I spread the whole created user, and I'm adding a token by calling generate GWT, where I'm providing created user inside. But here we're obviously getting an error that token is not specified inside user without password. This is why here we must create one more data type. And here I want to create a type user with token. And the idea is that we're basing it on the user without password, and we're adding inside a token. This is exactly what we will typically return in our API responses. This is why here we're taking user without password, and we're providing inside token, which is a string. In this case, inside we're getting the whole user without password and additionally a token. Now we can jump back inside dbts and return here schema.userWithToken. Now our code is completely valid because we're returning not only the whole created user, but also a token string. Let's create a new user, foo3, with username foo3. I'm hitting send, and we're getting back not only our data, but also a unique token for authentication. Our next step is to implement login into our application. This is why here inside dbts, let's create a new function login user. And it is an asynchronous function where inside we want to get an email, which is a string, and the password, which is also a string. And what we want to get back is a promise with our user with token. So the response is exactly the same like inside register. And our first step here is to try and find the user by these credentials. And again, we're getting an array of users back. This is why here we're destructuring just a first element. And we're calling here our db.select. And we're using from in order to specify the table. In our case, it is schema users. Now here we must provide where, which is a condition by which we want to find the user. And here will be equal. And inside we're providing schema.users.email. And as a second parameter, we're providing our email, which actually means we're selecting from users table where email that we provided is inside field email. And the last one here is limit. We want to get just a single element because our email is unique. After this, we want to check if we don't have a user, we want to throw an error. So let's check this. If we didn't find a user, then let's throw new error, which will be user not found. The next step here will be to compare the password that we provided. So let's create a variable isPasswordCorrect, and here we want to wait and compare by using bcrypt, and we're comparing password and user.password, which actually means here we got a user from the database and we're comparing its password with the password that we provided here inside our function. And this function will return boolean, and if it is false, then we want also to throw inside an error. So throw new error, incorrect password. If everything is fine, we must return the user, but just to remind you, this user will have a password field. We don't want to get it back. And I already showed you inside register that we can specify returning in order to get only fields that we want, but here we can't do that because we want to compare our password first, which actually means we must get rid of the password field. We can do that by using destructuring. Here I want to get a password and I will map it to unused variable password with underscore, and as a rest I want to spread user without password. And we're getting all this from our user, which actually means inside this password property we will have a string, and inside here we will get an object with ID, email and username. And now here we can return the spread of our user without password and the token. And in order to get the token, we're calling generate GVT, where inside we're providing our user without password, which actually means we're cutting our password and we're adding here token, and back we're getting user with token. So we successfully created our login user function, but we didn't create a route for that. This is why I want to copy paste fully our app post and change it on /users/login. And it is also an async function, but here we are calling our login user function, where inside we are providing first an email from body and then a password. Back we are getting result, which is a user, and we are responding with it. Let's check if it's working now. Here the route will be /user/login, and this is a post request where we're providing a username, an email and password. I'm hitting here send, and as you can see we got back all our data of foo3 user and additionally a token. Let's try to provide an email which does not exist. We're getting back an error, user not found, which actually means we successfully implemented logining of our user. After this, our client will store this token and use it later to authenticate our request. And in order to return for client correct information, we need to create a middleware which we will attach to routes in order to check if the user can have access to this data or not. This is why here inside source folder, let's create a new folder middlewares, and inside will be a new file auth.ts. And what is a middleware? This is just a function. So let's create a function authenticate, which is an asynchronous function, with request, which is a request from Express, then response, it is a response from Express, and next function, which is also coming from Express. And this function won't return anything, it will simply call next. So first of all, here we need to check if we specified header in the request or not. So if we don't have request.headers.authorization, we must throw an error unauthorized. So throw new error unauthorized. After this, we will try to read a token, and our token is inside headers authorization, but it consists of two words, token, space, and then our token. So here we want to split it by a space and get a second argument. And again, it is possible that token is wrong. This is why here we need to check if token is not found. Then we can answer with token not found. And after this, we want to try and parse our token. This is why we need to use try catch. We want to attach inside user field undefined, so we know that the user is undefined. And here we're calling next. And as you can see, here is the problem. There is no such field as user inside request of Express, which actually means we must extend this data type request in order to add a user inside. So here on the top, I want to create an interface, express request, which I am extending from existing request, which actually means we're taking all fields from request, but additionally I want to create here a user, which is either undefined or user with token. Now we can use this request inside our authenticate, and then we won't get an error because it is possible to set user to undefined inside catch. Now let's try to decode our token. So here will be some decode information, and we're calling here verify from JSON web token. We're providing inside our token and the secret, and our secret was GVT secret. As you can see back inside the code, we're getting string or JSON payload, which is completely wrong because TypeScript can't know what data we have inside. This is why here I want to say that this is an object with email string field. In this case, now we know inside the code we store an email. Our next step here is to find the user by email that we got inside the code, but we don't really have a function for that. So let's jump back inside DB, and somewhere here on the top, let's create a new function, which will be find by email. And it is an asynchronous function where inside we're providing an email, which is a string, and back we want to get a promise again of schema.user with token, which actually means we want to not only return the whole user from the database, but we want to remove our password and add a token there. This is why here actually we can use the same logic that we already used inside login in order to find our user. So here we're selecting from users table a user with email that we provided inside. And after this we can even copy this line to remove a user and return a JSON web token. So here again we're getting user without password, and then we're adding token inside. So our find by email function is ready. Now we can use it inside our middleware. So after we decoded our object, we can just get a user. And in order to do that, we can call find by email that we just created, and we're providing inside the code.email, which will return for us a user, and now we can add it inside our request. So request user equals user, and after this we're calling next to tell that our middleware finished its job and we can pass to our route. And as you can see here, we're getting an error. Our function should not return void, but promise of void, because we're using awaits inside. Now we must generate a new route in order to obtain user information. So we can actually copy paste this code of user login, for example, but it will be app get and the route will be /user. Here we're getting request, response and next, but before we want to call our middleware, and it will be this function authenticate that we just created. So first of all, our request will go through this middleware, it will parse a user and get it here in the request. But again here we must specify that this is not just request, but express request that we extended. Here inside we don't need this code at all, because inside request we get the whole user. So here we can respond with request.user. Our route is there, let's check this now. After logging, we must take this token and copy paste it. Then we must select here that this is a get and the route is /user. Body doesn't really matter, but inside headers we must create a new field, authorization, and the value here should be a string, token, space, and our token that we just copied. I'm hitting here send, and as you can see we got back our user foo3 based on this information. This is exactly what our client will use in order to get current user every single time. So as you can see, Drizzle is a comfortable ORM as it provides lots of TypeScript support for our application. And actually the most popular competitor for Drizzle is Prisma, and if you are interested how it is working and how to implement the project with it, don't forget to check this video also.